Hello everyone. This is Mary Jane. I used to be a supervision aide at Jules Quesnel Elementary School, but now I'm not doing that anymore. But I am making some art, and we got a grant for the school to make some art videos, and this is the first one. I wasn't sure how to start. I went over to the school on Labor Day, Monday. It was a beautiful, beautiful sunny morning, and I took a lot of pictures around the school. At the front of the school, there were some lovely purple flowers, along with some sunflowers, which were pretty much done. I think they lived their life, except for one that was quite lovely. I guess there were a couple that were pretty nice. And I also took some pictures of purple flowers, and I took some pictures of yellow flowers, and I saw a bee on one of the purple flowers, and I took a picture of the bee on the flower. And I took a whole lot of other pictures. I went over to behind the school near Bing, and I took some pictures of the BUTTERFLYWAY that's behind the fence there now. But it was quite lush, and there were lots of plants in there, including poppies, pink poppies that were so pretty. They were very small pink poppies. And there were some green round poppy heads. I'm not sure what you call them, but I like the shape of them. So I took some pictures of those, and then I could hold my iPad up to the fence, and it could see through a hole in the fence to get pictures. So I got my reference pictures by taking pictures with my iPad. And then I went over to the BOG and took a whole lot of pictures over there. It was a beautiful morning. But the BUTTERFLYWAY was doing quite well over the summertime. I guess as fall comes along, as it gets colder and colder, I suppose things will start to change a bit. But this is watercolor paint. It's a watercolor box of, they're paints from a watercolor box by Faber-Castell, which I really, really like. They're almost like tempera paint, but they're not. They're watercolor, so you can water them down and get a nice watercolor effect. I don't think tempera paint would work this well. And certainly you could do something like this with acrylic, but there's a problem with brushes and drying up. And so this is watercolor. I thought I would do a watercolor demonstration. When you start out with a watercolor painting, use a lot of water. Don't use your paint straight out of the pan or the tube. Water it down. Have a palette, the way I'm doing here, and add lots of water. And so you can put a very light base down when you're starting your watercolor, because you're going to let them dry, and then when they dry, those little areas, then you can go over them with a deeper tone or more color on top, in a darker shade, still watery, and you can build layers with watercolor, and it's quite a nice effect. So I have this little brush that came with the Faber-Castell paints. They have lovely brushes for children, and the paints are for children as well. They're non-toxic, and they're very nice paints. But they're kind of expensive, but you can take them apart, these little discs, and a child could take 2 discs and use them to paint. Another child could take another 2 discs, so that you could have lots of distance and people wouldn't be crowded over one box. You can separate them, and I think if there's 12 discs in a box, you could get 6 children could have 2 discs, and you could have 6 children working at their own place with their own colors. When I did this painting, I started to do it with just 3 colors, but I discovered that with these paints, and these paints don't blend as well for purples. If you mix blue and red with these Faber-Castell colors, you get a kind of brown, and I was looking for purple, and I couldn't do it. So I pulled out the purple as well, and I added some green too, because the green and yellow didn't work very well either. The blue with the yellow. So I had this lighter green. So I could still add blues to the color. There you can see I'm mixing. That's called a palette. That palette is a paper plate that has a plastic coating on it, which made it perfect for a palette to mix my colors on. You can use a plate that you can wash and reuse, or you can use, they have little plastic palettes. You might have some at school that were paint boxes that you could use the lids to mix your paints. Anyway, I was using this. I thought that would be a good idea. I know it's not ecologically good to have paper plates around, but I could use this over and over again, so it would make a good palette. But it would have to have a little plastic coating on it, because if you had a regular paper plate that was no coating on it, the paint wouldn't mix as well. It would just soak right into the paper. The paper I am painting on is watercolor paper. You can get it in pads at Dessers or at Michael's or at Opus. And watercolor paper is perfect for painting with watercolors. You can't really do watercolor on regular paper that you use in a photocopier. It won't work. It'll buckle, the paint colors won't look nice. You'll wonder, oh, this is no fun, this is not working. But if you get the right paper, watercolor paper, it works. And I think you can use these paints in a similar way on your sketchbooks, if you have a sketchbook. As long as you don't use large areas of watercolor, it shouldn't buckle too much. But as I said, you get the best effect with a good watercolor paper. Well, this isn't the best watercolor paper. This is student grade watercolor paper. I think it was Strathmore. It was a pad. And I kind of like it. You can buy really expensive watercolor paper, but you don't need that. This is a small size, as you can see. And I put the green tape around the edges, because this way, when I'm finished my painting, I will remove it and I'll have a nice clean edge around my picture, my painting. There I was adding stems with the tip of my brush. I really like these Faber-Castell brushes because they're inexpensive compared to watercolor brushes with sable. Sable brushes are very expensive. You don't need that. There's lots of brushes out there that you can use for watercolor, and I like to use a small brush for small paintings like this. I also have a 1-inch watercolor brush, which I use for large washes, but we're not doing large washes with this. I was quite happy with this, and now, as you see, the paint had dried underneath, so I started adding darker color over top. It was still watery, but it was darker color, so that I could get, it just pops. It just makes the picture, the image pop a little bit. You can get your shapes having more dimension and feeling to them. My little bee is very yellow there. So I went around. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. When you're painting, you never know if it's going to turn out or not. It might spoil it, but you have to keep going. I like to just keep going, even if I go too far. Now, when I put those lines on there, I thought, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. So I went back in and I removed it with a little bit of water in my brush, and I played around with it, and I softened it so that it wasn't quite so blatantly line that didn't belong there. Okay, so I was working away. It took a while to paint this little guy. Unfortunately, when I did this, it started to look like a wasp. I hate wasps. I don't think wasps' wings go in that direction, though. I wasn't realizing that I'd turned him into a wasp, but I was able to fix him later. So even if you make a mistake, you can always fix it later. Or I could even do a collage bee and paste it on top. And my bee is quite a big bee compared to the flowers, but I wanted him to be big so that he would be the center of attention on my painting. And when you're making art, sometimes you can change sizes and things to make things the way you want them to be. It's more of a decorative painting than an actual painting that a biologist might draw. We're doing art, and I'm not a biologist. But I think as we go along, we're going to learn a lot about the bog. I've already learned about owls, and I painted an owl as well. I learned that barred owls are quite common in the Camosun bog, but I couldn't see one the day I was there. It was a sunny day, and they probably sit on limbs of trees in the forest. So you have to be very quiet, I suppose, and look really hard to see owls in the trees. I guess they hunt at night, and I think they have amazing quiet flight ways of flying silently, so they can catch little mice and poor little creatures living in the bushes in the bog. But the owls have to eat too, I guess, so they catch things. Anyway, this is the flower painting. I also did an owl painting, which turned into a decorative owl. He doesn't look like a realistic owl, but I think he's fun. And I gave him horns because, like a horned owl has. But I have discovered that there are not any horned owls, as far as we know, I don't think, in the bog. But I drew him anyway. So I think I'm going to do another owl, a barred owl, so that we can, if we're more interested in doing something that actually lives in the bog, I might sketch barred owl in my sketchbook, and I will share it with you. So I was adding darker colors as I went along, if you're still listening to me. I speeded this up because otherwise it would really take a lot longer, but I really don't move my hand that quickly. But one good thing about painting like this, it's a very quiet thing to do. You just focus on your painting and pick a little of this color and a little of that color, and it's very satisfying to paint. I hope you can enjoy painting. This is a little bit too advanced, I think, for maybe grade 1, 2 kindergartens, but I bet there's some grade 6s and 7s that might be able to find do a watercolor with this much work on it. But there is the handout, and it could even be colored with markers if you just want to color. I think it would be kind of pretty, and you can make the colors any color you wanted to. Markers are fun. But this is watercolor. So yeah, I made a handout of my pencil drawing of this particular image, which you can trace onto a watercolor paper or do some drawing paper for markers, or just a plain paper for markers. But this is watercolor paper, as I said. You can't use just plain copy or paper for watercolor. It won't work. It would just look awful. It would buckle, and the colors won't stay on the surface. They would just go into the paper, and this is a watercolor on watercolor painting on watercolor paper. Yeah. So I was thinking I was almost done, but then I thought, oh, I think I better touch up that bee with my little pen. I bought a bunch of little pens at the dollar store. They were really inexpensive. I got a whole bunch for just a few dollars. And I just discovered doing this project that it dries very quickly, and you can paint over it and it won't run. So it's like it stays on the paper. Now, I turned my bee into a wasp. It looks like a wasp. I am afraid of wasps. I got stung once and it hurt. I don't like wasps. So I didn't realize it when I was doing this that I had turned it into a wasp, but I will fix it later, I promise you. That's one thing about making stuff. Sometimes you can change it and fix it. So it's going to have to fix that, definitely. And I might even use collage to put a bee over top of that in the end. So once I started with the black pen, I got carried away. I started to put petals around those little yellow flowers. At this point, I didn't realize I was going to have to do the whole painting with an outline like this. So once I started, I had to keep going. But so it turned into a different kind of picture, because I think alone this way, it would have been just fine if I'd left it. But I went at it with my pen, and I gave it outlines, and so it changed into a different kind of picture. It has a looser, looks like I drew it with a pen before I painted it. I wasn't worried about the edges or the lines. I went outside the lines with my pen. I was looking for a light touch feeling to it. So once I started, I had to go right through. Now if you paint a watercolor painting, you don't have to go around the edges with black, but it's something that you just feel as you go along what you want to do. Then I went around the flowers. Oh man, I just went all the way, didn't I? Had to do all the flowers and all the leaves and every petal had to be outlined. So it changed the whole thing. And I think I liked it better when it was just watercolor alone. However, I'd gone this far, so I had to keep going. Yeah. There they go. I had to go around all the petals. So I tried to do it loose and rough so that it looked like a loose and rough drawing. As I said, I speeded this up. I didn't draw that fast. So I didn't really have to do this line, but once I started, I had to keep going. So, and besides, I was having fun. I was learning. What I could do with my watercolors and my pens. So it was an exploration to see what I could do. And then I thought about some new paints that I bought that are kind of pearlized. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if I put those pearlized paints over top of this. So it was okay the way it was. It was nice, nice little painting, but I pulled out those pearlized paints. And I think I started to go at it again. And the more I went at it, I thought they would dry transparent, but they're not as transparent as they seem to be. But I put yellows over yellow areas, and I put pinks over pink areas, and I put the purples over the purple areas. So I dulled the whole picture down. But as I said, I was experimenting and I was learning, and I have these new paints and I was seeing what they would do. And I had watched a demonstration by another painter with her watercolors, and she had some, not the same set, but she had some, and she watered it down quite a bit and brushed it across her watercolor painting, and it was quite pretty, and it has this nice shimmer when you're finished. And so when this was, then I started doing foliage underneath. I thought I'll make it look like there's more plants and things around these leaves. So I think I went too far, but as I said, I was learning. And once I'd started putting little foliage in there and with the pearlized paint, I had to go all the way. So I kept going. We're almost done, I promise you. And I added some orange. I thought, oh, I better put a little bit of orange there. It adds a little perk, makes it pop a bit. So there was my painting, pretty much done. But I think I should have stopped a couple of steps back. But in the end, it was okay. I still have to fix that bee, because it still looks like a strange kind of wasp. So I will fix it. So I put a title on my video, and thank you, Madam Ev, for making this possible and for Everyone at the school, the teachers, I hope you enjoy this. I hope we can get this going, and I hope the sketchbook project turns out to be successful. So that's the end of my first video demonstration of watercolor painting. See how it glows a little bit there? It's a little bit of glow to the paint. That's the end. Thank you, everyone.